Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hi, Bryana. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Alicia.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. I'm super pumped. Like when you posted something about lying, however long ago, I don't even remember, I was like, I need her on my podcast because I get so many questions about lying. Like, why do these kids lie? And I think as stepmoms, like we get in our head about they're only lying because they're my stepkid. They're only lying because they're trying to be difficult. They're only lying because of all of these things. And I know that that's not true. But before we get into everything, who
Mhm.
are you? What's your deal? Like, give me your elevator pitch. What would you say to
So,
somebody in 30 seconds?
oh my gosh, 30 seconds. That's a lot of pressure. Okay. I'm Bryana. I'm Bryana Kappadakunnel. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in infant, family, early childhood, and perinatal mental health. I wrote a book called Parent Yourself First, and that's really what I do. I teach parents how to heal the wounds that were passed on to them from their own upbringing, from society, from culture, so that they don't have to pass those wounds along to their children and ultimately transform the way children and parents understand each other, relate to each other, and connect to each other.
That's why I started following you. Like, I remember your book is just like recent, but I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, parenting yourself and like healing your inner child, all of the things, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, but today we're gonna get into lying. So, why do kids lie? Is this normal? Why does it happen?
Lying. Oh, yeah. Lying is extremely normal. And children lie for many different reasons. It really depends on the child's age, right? So, like when they're young, the child lies because they're really engaging in wishful thinking. Like they believe that if they like say the lie, then it's real and everyone will be on board with it. There's not any malicious intent or to like manipulate a parent or to try to like subvert a parent in any way. And some children, then as they get a little bit older, they might lie because they're trying to like hold in mind this idea that like there can be two thoughts. So even something like that, like on a psychological level, their brains are figuring out that they can hold multiple ideas in mind at one time. And then as they get older, it might be to avoid punishment or to try to distract a parent away from if especially if the child feels like there's too much pressure on them. It might be to please a parent, and then also just to like pepper in more nuance here. um, there are some lies that are like socially acceptable, right? Like a white lie or like a yes, this cake is delicious, right?
Right.
Like it might not be delicious, and the child might say, "Oh, I don't like this cake," and we'll get angry at them. Don't say that. That's not okay. You
Right.
smile and you say, "Thank you. It's very good." So, right. So, like, we have to think about like what it's like to be a child and to hear, "Don't lie." And then to be told, well, there are some lies that are okay. And then
Right.
they have to wrestle with that a little bit. So, like I said, there's a lot of different reasons why a child might lie. As a parent, though, what I think is most important for us is one, don't set your child up to lie to you. That's a big problem. And two, if you do unintentionally catch your child in a lie, be curious with them, wonder with them what is going on inside. And that curiosity is what's going to really allow us to, I think, gain a little bit more connection in these moments. And then we can offer some correction and guidance so that, we're building that trust with our children. They know that they don't actually have to lie to us. They can tell us the truth.
Okay, I love that, but let's talk about something you just said. Don't set your child up to lie to you. What does that mean?
So that's like where, you tell your child to clean their room. And then you go into their room and you see that their room is not clean. And then you go up to them and you say, "Did you clean your room?"
Mm, you're baiting
And
them.
they say, "Correct." And they say, "Yeah." because now they're put on the spot, they're at pressure, they want to please you, they're anxious, they're nervous, they're afraid of punishment,
Mhm.
especially if your tone is coming in kind of harsh and strong. And then it's like, liar, you did not clean your room, I just went and checked. Don't set your kid up for a lie. Hey bud, I just checked your room, it's not clean. I need you to stop what you're doing, I need you to go clean up your room.
I
Right?
like,
You
yeah,
be more direct. We when we do this, like when we set our children up to lie to us, we're really like setting the relationship up for failure.
yeah, I agree. Especially when you talked about the curiosity part, like I, in my coaching, like I always, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with yourself, whether it's with the kids, the ex, whatever, get curious as to why you're feeling whatever it is. But if you can get curious as to why they're lying, like I used to say, and I've talked about this before on the podcast with my stepson specifically, because I have two a lot older step kids. I would always say to them, I'm not your mom and I'm not your dad, but I'm here as another adult in the house. I can help you through anything unless you're lying, right? Then you're also there's going to be something that we need to talk about concerning that. And then as long as you haven't killed yourself or somebody else, like we can get through it. It might be messy, but we're going to be able to get through it. But I'm on your
Mm-hmm.
team, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when a lie has happened, when I've been like, okay, let me go back and think, how do we get to this point and what led you to believe that it would be better for you to lie about whatever it was, big or small? And like, let's undo that thought process. But it takes a lot of work to go back and try to figure out what happened to get us to this point because it's easier just to like knee jerk reaction, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially if we're talking about like older children, if we're talking about kids that are like in upper elementary, middle school, high schoolers, I mean, if they're lying, um, almost always there's going to be some kind of shame there.
For
The
sure.
child is lying in a way to like survive what feels dark, scary, hard, and lonely, right? That's what shame is: dark, scary, hard, lonely. And so the child is, if we can connect to that, if we can connect to the shame, and not necessarily make it about the lying, the lesson around being truthful will organically come up when safety is established. But
Yes.
like that's what parents really need to understand, that there's a lack of emotional safety within the child that like doesn't always necessarily have to do with you either. Like this doesn't mean, oh, you haven't created a safe enough environment for your child, or you don't have a secure attachment with your child, that's why they're lying to you. That's not accurate. Children lie because developmentally it is normal, it is appropriate. It's a way to survive what feels shameful, what feels scary, what feels hard, if they're afraid that they're going to get punished. Again, you don't even have to be a punishment home, right? If you are, it's going to exacerbate this issue, but like you don't have to be a punishment home for a child to fear punishment and for a child to fear getting in trouble, because there is just like this underlying thing that I think a lot of us deal with. You know, we see it around between the ages of 4 and 6. It's a developmental anxiety called the fear of being bad, where these children are wrestling with, am I good or am I bad? And they're acting out, right? 4, 5, 6-year-olds, they act out and then they get confirmation whether they are still good, whether they're still lovable. Their love is not transactional. The love is not conditional. My parent still shows up and supports me and helps me through it. Or they get confirmation, yeah, I am bad. My parents distance from me. They disconnect from me. They yell at me. They make me feel that I feel the shame of that disconnection, of that rejection every time I make a mistake. So many children are wrestling with that wound. Now, I want to say this: if you as an adult still wrestle with that wound, if you as an adult still feel like you make a mistake, you have a perceived failure, and you are bad, you are wrong, you're not lovable, you're not wanted, that's really the work here, right? We make it about, well, how do we get our kids to stop lying? Focus on the healing and mending this feeling of shame and badness within yourself so that you can show up for that with your child, and then guide them and teach them a better way to express themselves. Teach them how to kind of be humble, admit fault, or, whatever it is that they might be lying about. Teach them how to like have that accountability without shame. But it really does start with us being able to do that for ourselves.
Okay, that's the podcast. Thank you so much for coming along. But it's so true. Once you can get comfortable being in the uncomfortable situations, things really start to change. And once you, the curiosity, I always go back to that, like we've already talked about, like once you can be curious about it and figure out, like, is it me? Right. And I think that's a hard thing as for parents in general. Doesn't matter if you're a step parent, adoptive, whatever kind of parent you are, or an adult in the situation, right? I mean, you could be a teacher or you could have not, you don't have to have any kids, but like, that is the hardest part is just sitting through that uncomfortableness and trying to figure out why is this activating something in me? Why is this triggering me? Why am I so hard on about whatever it is? Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I love that you touch on that, which I'm not surprised because of like the work that you do, but that's so perfect. But how do you reinforce boundaries after somebody's lied without creating a rift, like in your relationship?
Yeah. I mean, it's after we get to the root of it and we understand what the child was trying to cover up or avoid feeling, and we work on feeling that together and finding safety in that, then we collaborate with the child. So, what do you think? What if this happens again? How will you do this differently?
The critical.
Who can you come to? Who can you go to, even if it isn't me?
Mhm.
Who in your life do you trust to be able to go to be able to share honestly? And then I would encourage you to reinforce your family value. One of the things that we work on together as a family is being truthful. And even when it's hard, sharing the truth, even when it's hard. And you'll never get in trouble. You'll never be punished for sharing the truth, even if the thing you're telling me is wrong and shouldn't happen. You'll never get in trouble for it. I will always be grateful that you told me the truth. So I think like reinforcing that is really important for kids. Like I'm thinking of this one client that I have. He's a little bit older. I think he's like 10 or so. He got in trouble at school and he told me about it. He told me that he got in trouble. But then when he was telling me about like the nature of him getting in trouble at school, not gonna lie, I could tell he wasn't being totally forthcoming with me. Because when I asked curiously follow-up questions, eye contact started to evade and he wanted to change the subject really quickly. And I'm not going to go into the details for confidentiality, but that's the nature of it. And something that I really keep in mind, what I was curious, like, why might he be not being totally forthcoming with me here? It's obvious to me that he's not telling me the whole story. And he has mentioned things to me like, everything we talk about here is just between us, right? You're not going to go and tell my parents, right?
Mhm.
So then I took that upon myself to say something to him. Are you going to talk about this with your parents? And he goes, no, I don't want them to know. And I said, is there a reason why you don't want them to know? And he said, because they won't believe me anyway.
Oh,
And as I was like sitting there with like my feeling of like, I don't know if I fully believe you, I realized that this kid almost like needed to cling to this lie
yeah,
to like hold on to a self-perception that he's worth believing,
yeah.
that he's trustworthy. And that felt more important to me, that he knows he's worth believing and he's worth trusting
Mhm.
than digging out the lie.
Yeah, I totally
And
agree.
so I encourage you as parents to be really mindful. The lie is going to always come out. It's going to come out eventually, right? The truth, right? Isn't that what they say? The truth always
Mhm.
finds its way. So it will eventually find its way. So I also think that sometimes we feel like, well, I got to put pressure on this. I got to stop this right away. Got to give a consequence. We get too hard on it
Mhm.
without like maybe connecting to what is this child really holding on to?
Mhm.
by trying to keep this lie up.
I love that you've touched on this because one of the questions one of my followers had submitted was, what if one parent is denial that their kid does lie? How do I handle my stepson lying, but his mom says that he's not lying, even when it's obvious that he did? And I completely agree with you. Like there have been times where one of my stepkids or both of them have lied about whatever, right? Like you don't even, and it could be like at school, something happened at school and like the teacher is like, okay, well, they probably have lied, but we don't have to be so like we need to get to the bottom of this right now because the truth always comes out. I mean, I lied as a kid. We all do it, right? Like, and I remember something had happened. We'd gone to a concert out of state. We weren't supposed to leave the state. And then months later, my mom was like, "Oh yeah, kind of like how you guys went to that concert down in Missouri. I'm from Iowa originally." And I was like, "How do you know?" And she was like, "Oh, the cell at that point, like it would tell you like where your cell phone tower
Right.
was being used, right?" And I'm like, "Oh," but she's like, "I knew you were lying anyway." But you don't have to hammer that point right away because it sabotages that relationship like you said, like with he just wanted to be trustworthy or feel like believable. And if
Right.
you are so far on it right then and there, like there's a reason why they're yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, you don't need to
So
get
then so
right
then
now.
we look for opportunities to really reinforce that, to try to reinforce the thing that the child wants us to see in them, that they are trustworthy, that they are believable, that we're not in a police state.
Mhm.
This is a relationship that we have with our children. And like unless our children are like telling us serious lies, like they're skipping school, they're you know assaulting someone, they're stealing, right? If our child is engaging in like delinquent behavior that can seriously cause issues for them down the line, then honestly a podcast is not going to solve that. We need family
Right.
therapy. We need to get to the bottom of what's really going on here in the child parent relationship, in the parental mental health, as well as the children's mental health. But like for the vast majority of children, they're trying to save face for a lot of them. And so yeah, as you said, like we all do it, and trying to just have some empathy and compassion and awareness of it, and trusting that it will eventually come out, and they will feel badly about that when it does. And I'm here to continue to support you and ask you, what do you feel like you learned from this situation? What
Mhm.
do you want to do differently next time?
And I feel like something specifically in like a blended family situation with stepmoms is there are so many things outside of our control. And I heard this in marriage counseling early on, like as a parent, you see your kid through a lens of love. As a step parent, you see your kid or your step kid through a lens of like responsibility, right? And so they're being irresponsible by lying, is like what the perception would be. And so all of a sudden, step parents turn into like truth seekers, right? Like, I'm going to prove to you that your kid is lying. And it's like, okay, hold on, let's take a step back. Let's take our ego out of this. We don't need to prove anything, but it's just, I need to prove that I'm good enough, or I need to let's not prove any of these things right because like you said like you're it's the relationship that we need to build and if you're going to nitpick everything over small minor white lies granted if it's the delinquent stuff like you're talking about that's a different story but if there's smaller things you're not building a relationship at that point. You're actually isolating the kid that much further. And it's so if you're a stepmom and you're listening to this, I might not be your friend anymore. But the reality of the situation is sometimes you have to check your ego and get curious, like, why do I feel like I need to press the situation? Why do I feel like I need to make sure that this parent or that parent knows that this kid is in fact actually lying? In 5 years, is this going to matter? In 5 months, is this going to matter? Probably not. So let's take a step back. But if it is going to matter, again, that's a different situation. Brianna here could help you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I find that a very interesting. I've never heard that as a step parent, you relate to the child as a responsibility. I'm very interested in that idea. I don't see why you wouldn't relate to a stepchild with love as as the primary. You're loving these children as if they are your own because in a way, yeah, you are a grown up to them. And I don't know. So I guess I'm having a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around like why there is even a distinction there, that if we're prioritizing love and relationship and connection with these children and actually seeing, separation, and parents, adding in bonus parents, as a potential source of stress in a child's life, and then understanding that lying is can be a stress response. It is never, it's not about asserting one's like authority and getting down to the nitty gritty with a child and like proving anything with the child. It's really just recognizing, oh, there's circumstances here that are influencing what's happening. And no, like we don't want to be walked all over, and nobody should. And no, we don't want to walk on eggshells because that's not healthy either. But like connecting with that child, like, hey, I like as you said, I know I'm not your mom. I know I'm not your dad. And I know that I'm not even here to replace them in any way. But I do love you and I do care about you. And I want something special between us if you do. And I'm willing to work on that with you. I'm willing to spend time with you if you're open to that. If especially if the rest of the family is open to that. Like spend time with the children, get to know them, get interested in them, be curious about them, do the things with them that they like to do, whether they're your blood kids or they're not your blood kids, it doesn't matter. Spending time with children and being immersed in their world is actually going to reduce this just from the get-go. Like this, it's going to prevent major problematic lying. Most of the lies are going to be white lies. I wasn't at that party. I don't know. We weren't there. We I was at so and so's house.
Why are you so
Oh
fidgety all of a sudden?
yeah, oh, I'm good. I'm good, mom.
But just to
Okay.
speak to that for a second,
Mm-hmm.
everyone's on their own healing journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are brought up in a situation like we were brought up in, and you haven't had that growth journey, or you haven't been on this path of like trying to find something better, what you're going to do is perpetuate that cycle, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
how I parent now is completely different than how I was when I showed up on the scene 13 years ago because I
Mm-hmm.
what I knew, right? So everyone has to find their role. And then there's so many dynamics. Like everyone else has to be on board with it, right? Like the rest of the family has to be on board with you guys being close. There might be loyalty binds with this kid and their other parent, presumably their mom if you're a stepmom, right? So that might cause conflict between the kid and their parent, their other parent, because all of a sudden you like Brianna more than you like me. Well, why? So then they start lying to the other parent because
Right.
rather save face because God forbid they like you more than me.
Right.
So there's so many different dynamics, but I agree, like focusing on.
And that dynamic though that you're describing, that like loyalty dynamic, the exact example that you just gave, like that's a family therapy matter. Like
Absolutely.
that is something that we as adults involved in children's lives want to actively prevent from happening. And if that's coming up for us, that's okay that it's coming up for us. That's okay that we're feeling wounded and we're feeling like the wounds of rejection because our child is building bonds with, you know, people that represent something similar to us. But
Mhm.
we have to do that work
Yes.
to heal that wound and not put it on the child and make it the child's responsibility to then have to, you know, lie about how they feel about one person to please the other person and then lie to that person to not offend that person. That is going to combust eventually.
Yes.
That is not an environment that allows a child to thrive. That takes away from so many of their other resources that they have to be able to utilize to do well in school, to make friends, to discover who they are, to figure out their identity, to decide what they want to do in the world, to figure out their passion, to figure out what they're creative about. Like, we don't want to like have our wounds and our ego interfere with the soul development of these beautiful humans that are here in front of us, our tiny humans. We don't want to be in interference with that. So yeah, I think your point is really well made. We have to do that healing work for ourselves and not put the children in the way of doing it for us.
Yeah. I saw something years ago that said you have to love your child more than you hate your ex. And I was like,
Mm,
oh, that's a really good point, right? It goes back to like the whole ego thing and like putting them in the middle of whatever. And sometimes, I see it like part of the reason why I became a stepmom coach is because like I'm like, I feel like I've like cracked the shell on it and like I've got a really good handle on it. Like everything is really good
mm,
in the situation. It's all about growth. Everyone's on their own journey. But
Mm-hmm.
um, but there was a lot of stepmoms that started out like I did who really struggled and were like, Dear Google, how do I get out of this? Because this sucks. It's really hard, right? Like when you're
Mm.
thrown into whatever dynamic that you're thrown into. But it's just finding an outside resource. If something's not working, something's not working, right? But like finding that outside resource of like, hey, I've been in your situation, I've been in your shoes. What's happening is here's what I'm seeing happening. And here's the part that you also play in it, right? Because it's easy for me to sit here and blame everyone else, or it's easy for stepmoms I coach to sit here and blame everyone else. It's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to kind of navel gaze sometimes and be like, damn, like I
Yeah.
have a part in this too. And that part sucks. Like it's not always great to look in the mirror. It's not always great to like turn the finger back and be like, I have my own growth that I need to do. But that's where a lot of the change happens, is just, again, it comes back to the curiosity point. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for me, like I showed up, had never been married. I didn't bring any kids to the relationship. And I'm like, I'm perfect. I don't have a bad ex. I don't have kids. Like like I'm perfect. Like what? And then it was like, oh, let's talk about my childhood and like how that's
Yeah.
playing out. Like, why do we always go back to that part? Like, what is happening? Right. So it's just, again, everyone's on their own journey and it's more than just you. Like you have to look at like I mean, it's more than everyone else. Sometimes you do actually have to look in the mirror and face yourself, and it's not always a good look.
But how about to that point though, being able to like take accountability for our own part in what might feel messy in our families, whatever your family dynamic may be, being able to do that and to do that um, authentically, do it consistently, be brave, be bold, be courageous, be honest, be self-reflective. The more we do that, the children inherently learn to do that as well. That becomes what we're modeling. We're modeling humility. We're modeling looking inward. We're modeling accountability as opposed to blame, not me, finger outward,
Yeah.
get the attention off of me, nothing to see here, look over there, right? The distracting artist, look over there, take a look at that. Instead of doing that, we're modeling what we really want for our children. And
Mhm.
again, like when we're thinking about lying prevention, this is an excellent way to prevent the lies from like spinning out of control, right? Because we're tackling shame when
Mhm.
we behave this way. We're improving self awareness, which automatically often increases self compassion, right? When we have self awareness and we have compassion and we have empathy, shame cannot exist. It can't exist in those environments. But when awareness and compassion and empathy do not exist, they are not present, it shame proliferates. It becomes the thing that is guiding all of our interactions. And that's what feels messy. That's what feels sticky. That's what we're trying to avoid. That's what every single person on the planet, in my humble opinion, is trying to avoid. They are trying to avoid shame and they are seeking deep connection,
I
right?
agree.
That's what we're trying to get to. That's all our children want and desire. And honestly, that's all we want and desire as adults as well. So if we can just see that and connect to that, I think it just makes it less complicated.
It does, especially as stepkids that like, go back and forth between two houses. You don't really feel like you have a deep connection anywhere. So you kind of just float back and forth. And so you're constantly looking for that. And and then and then there's so many layers, Brandon, but like then add in that like the households are ran differently. Like maybe one household is structured and the other one's not. And so
Right.
whatever works at one house doesn't the other, right? So there's so many, oh, we could totally unpack this. But
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is the best way to hold someone accountable for lying? That was the question that was asked, but I'm like, what's the best way to show like that lying really isn't that great of a way to do it? I think that's like
Yeah.
asking like
Definitely.
humility.
Well, yeah, ask them. We want to get to know what first of all, we want to know what the truth. We want to unpack it. We want to talk to the child about how they're feeling, talking about it. What are they observing? What are they noticing in their bodies? What are they feeling inside? What do they think I'm thinking about it?
Yeah.
It's a really good question to ask children because usually like you'll hear them say like, well, I think you think I'm bad. I think you don't want me. You don't want to be around me anymore because I messed up. They'll say things like that. Then you can, would you like to know how I feel about you right now? Right. And then we can have a moment of repair. Well, actually, I'm not feeling that way about you at all. The way I'm feeling right now is really grateful that you have told me the truth. I feel sad that you felt like you couldn't, um, or you felt like you needed to lie. And I would like us to come up with a plan to be more forthcoming and more honest with each other, um, because lying ends up hurting all of us, right? It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And that, I bet that took a lot of work, huh? To keep that lie a secret. It kind of feels like it eats you up. Yeah, that's how it feels. So I want us to move forward in a way knowing that no matter what we have to say, we're being honest with each other. We don't need consequences. No switch. No, no friends for the weekend. No summer camp is completely irrelevant. It's going to make your child resent you, and it ultimately is going to hurt you both. Honestly, having the heart to heart conversation, taking the time to do that, taking the time to like sit in the shame and feel that together and process it together, that's the consequence, if you will. It's the natural reaction that has to happen to heal and repair and move forward. And then of course that planning piece, what are we going to do differently, I think is a really important thing to explore with a child. And then if and when it happens again, we have this conversation again until they no longer need this conversation because they will outgrow it.
Hmm. And kids need repetition, right? That's why they keep dropping things to make sure that it still drops, right? But
So much repetition.
to speak to you,
Yes.
to your point about having the conversations, with my stepson, he would, one time we were talking about it, I was like, do you think I'm crazy for just, because I would always ask him like randomly, like, how am I doing as a stepmom? Like, how am I doing at, right? You want some valid feedback or some honest feedback, but like, that's the kind of relationship we have. Like, I can just ask him what's going well in our relationship, what's not, what do I need to
Beautiful.
work on? Right? Like, what do you need to work on? Um, but I would say, do you think I'm crazy for whenever I sit you down and I'm like, all right, let's have conversations? Because I'm the one that will have the hard conversations. I'm completely now comfortable sitting in the messiness and like the uncomfortable things. And he's like, honestly, no, Alicia, I think that having the conversations is better because if you were just to lecture me, I'd be like glazed over and not listening to you anymore. But since you make me have these conversations with you, I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. Like, what are we going to talk about now? And so even for older stepkids or like even for older kids, it doesn't necessarily have to be a stepkid, like that works. And
Hmm.
it's just like the critical thinking part of it gets them to like think about, okay,
Yeah.
why am I doing this? And then
Hmm.
stopping the train before it completely derails. So I love that you touched on
Exactly.
having that.
Exactly. You're so right. And I just want to point out something you said that I think was very brilliant. You have check-ins about your relationship with your children. I do this with my children as well. My children are pretty young, 6 and 3, but I'll say something to them like, "Oh, what do you think? What's something that mommy does that you really that makes you feel really loved? And what's something that mommy does that makes you feel really bad?
Mhm.
Right? Tell me about it."
Great conversation to have the first time you have.
I I invite them to share that with me. What am I doing well that works here? What am I doing that doesn't work here? That like I want feedback. I ask every single client I work with, give me feedback. What's working about our sessions? What's not working with our sessions? I don't care how old the children. If the child is 4, I'm asking the question. If it's a full-grown adult, I'm asking the question. These are relational skills, right? And when the conversations when that's the precedent,
Mhm.
right? That we are in relationship together, we're going to have better bonds. We're going to see more honesty. We're going to see more authenticity. We're going to see more humbleness. We're going to see more willingness to grow. We're going to see more bravery around the pain of growth because growth is freaking painful. Let's be honest.
It is.
So that really stood out to me in what you shared. And then there was something else that you said that really stood out to me as well. It was the critical thinking piece and the not lecturing. I think your child really spoke to that well. Their eyes do glaze over
Mhm.
when they feel like we're talking at them. They need us to talk with them. I tell parents every day, stop being so commanding. Stop being so demanding. Ask, tell me your thoughts. I
Mm.
want to know what was happening inside for you. And don't accept, I don't know, as
Yeah.
an answer. You say, I'll wait.
Ah, those are the two scariest words my stepson said I ever said to him.
Yeah,
That's
I'll
hilarious.
wait.
He was like,
Yeah,
I knew you would.
because I know you will. I'll wait. And it's creating space for the child to actually stop trying to think about what I'm thinking and stop trying to think about what is it that she wants to hear, right? Because that's what the kids are obsessed with. I just want to tell
Yeah.
them what they want to hear so I can get out of this. No,
Right.
I will wait for you to actually think about what's going on inside for you because I'm invested in that. We want our children to feel our investment in them. When they feel that, when they know that, it creates a relational safety that allows these things to not be so heavy.
Hmm. Completely agree. Yeah. That's hilarious that you said, I'll wait.
Mhm,
It was another check-in thing. I was like, what's the scariest thing I've ever said to you? And he's like, when you said, I'll wait. I'm like, what? I had no idea what he was going to say. I was really nervous about it. And he was like,
mhm.
because I knew that you would sit there and wait. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I do. It's like the premise for a relationship. This has been so good. Thank you so much for talking to me about lying. Where can everyone find you online? I know you have a community, but tell us all about it.
Yes, thank you. I have an online community called the Conscious Mommy Community. It is open for parents of primarily, I would say, birth to 12 years old for right now. And inside, I teach a live weekly class. I do a Strong Willed Kid monthly parenting
Oh,
meetup.
so good.
So good. And that one is like a live group coaching call. So
Oh,
parents actually join me on the camera and we're talking in real time about real problems. I have courses in there. I have every single workshop I have ever taught. It is extremely affordable. I intentionally priced it pretty much less than a latte these days because I think good, helpful parenting information should not break the bank. And it's a very active community. There's a forum for parents to post. People are we're being cheerleaders. Like, we're not here to shame you or to judge you. We are here to love you. Like, you scream at your child, you can go post on this forum that you did
right.
that, and we will honor you and we will recognize your stress. And we will provide you encouragement and support and advice if you need it, or we will just hold a space for you if that is what you are needing so that you can feel your feelings. And I just think having a space for that that's not filled with trolls,
Oh
right?
my
There's no
gosh. Yeah.
trolls. Right. If
Yes.
you go onto like a Facebook parenting group and like share something, it's like keyboard warriors are behind to like judge you and make you feel terrible.
Yeah.
That none of that is happening. I got kicked out of a baby led weaning group once because I suggested somebody give their kid a smoothie. So
Good for you.
none of that is happening here. We love all of you. We want you to bring all of you. We love your children. And I am just so honored to be able to spearhead this space. We have over 200 members, so it's
I love
great experience so far. And my book comes out in January. Parent
it.
Yourself
Yay.
First.
Oh my
Yay!
gosh, I'm so excited for that too. Thank you again so much, Brianna. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Alicia.
Okay, wait. Before you end this podcast and go and leave a rating and review, two additional lying questions that came up that we didn't have time to answer. So, question number one is my stepkid's mom or stepkids' mom calls when they are at her house because they don't listen to her and wants my husband to punish them for lying or being mean to her, but they don't act like that when they're here. What do we do? So, the stepkids are with their mom lying or being mean to her, and mom calls dad to say, hey, can you punish them even though they don't act like that at this house? So a few things. It depends on the situation, right? It depends on the severity of like the lying or what being mean to her means. But I would say, depending on your relationship as well with that other house, is how you're going to handle this. So maybe you don't punish them at your house because they don't act like that here. You know, maybe you're lucky and they're like perfectly good angels when they're at your house, which, let's be honest, we know that that's not true. But you don't necessarily need to punish them at your house, but I think you would be remiss if you didn't at least address it. Like, hey, you know what, we hear from your mom that you're acting like this, like you're lying, or you are talking back to her, or you're swearing at her, cursing at her, not following her rules, whatever the case may be. But here at our house, you guys do X, Y, and Z. And it could boil down to just the differences in like how your house is ran. Like maybe the one house has structure and rules and the other one doesn't. And so kids are acting out because of it. You don't necessarily need to punish them at your house, but dad or your husband can absolutely address that behavior and be like, you know what, no matter where you are, we expect that you guys are going to act appropriately. However you act here, we would hope that you would act like that elsewhere. Question number 2 is what to do if you have one parent telling their kid to lie to the other parent. This one is really tough, and I'm not going to lie to you. I've definitely seen this. And to be honest with you, there's not really much that you can do except have conversations with that kid and just, like Bryana and I were talking about, just reaffirming like, hey, you're safe here. We want you to be honest with us. We understand that you are put in a weird situation. It might feel uncomfortable, whatever the case may be, but we want you to be honest with us. We want you to feel comfortable enough to tell us the truth. Because, like Bryana said, the truth is always going to come out. Like, it's always going to come out. Like, you know. And even if you know, it kind of speaks to the question of, like, what if one parent is denial that their kid lies? Like, how do I handle my stepson lying, but his mom says that he's not lying, even when it's obvious that he did? Like, it depends on the lie, too. Like, are they lying about big things, or are they lying about silly things, like they didn't go to this party, or they... whatever it is. Like, it depends on the severity of the lie, but you could always go back in and try to have a conversation with the other parent. Like, hey, so-and-so said that this is happening or this is going on. Can we work something out? But it is really hard. Like, you can't tell somebody else how to parent, and maybe like that's how they were brought up. So again, getting curious, like maybe they grew up with white lies. Maybe they lied to like get through their childhood until they were like out, and like that's just how it's instilled in them, because I've definitely seen this in dynamics as well. So what to do if you have one parent telling their kid to lie to another sucks so freaking much. I would absolutely recommend that you join the Stepmom Side community. Come in, jump on office hours, get a little bit of help on how do I navigate this, like without knowing like questions that are being asked. But yeah, lying is such a touchy subject, and like Bryana said, like it's completely developmentally normal, and a lot of stepmoms get in their feelings about, oh, they're just doing it because they're my stepkid, or they're trying to be difficult, or whatever the case may be. No, kids just lie. Like, it's just developmentally normal. But I hope that this really answered a bunch of questions that you have about lying, or kind of got you to think about it in a different perspective. If you have additional questions, like send me a message on Instagram. If you have additional topics that you want me to cover, there is right below this a place where you can enter in like topics, like click the link for topics for the podcast. But thank you so much for listening. Please leave a rating and review, and I will chat with you next week. Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Krasko. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.